Perfect. Yeah, I guess maybe due to my mistake of adding the wrong date yesterday. I already heard some people were waiting yesterday, so apologies for that. Nevertheless, we know we have usually a smaller live audience, but we're still doing this because we get a lot of positive feedback from the community. Of course, we also see how long people watch the videos, so it's still worthwhile. And even if it was just for you, the four guys here, we'll continue this. Also, a little update. So in December, Johnny and I will take a break. So there's no KQLCafe on the last Tuesday of December. However, stay tuned for 2023. In fact, we already have guests standing up in the line until I think somewhere June. Lots of interesting people from both the community and, of course, from the Microsoft product group. There we were also able to convince some people to speak about where KQL was going, what to expect, but also, related technologies like workbooks. Will continue to focus on those, and of course also, with a focus on detection engineering or KQL hunting itself. Yeah. Good. So today we have a guest. Yeah. Bert-Jan Cyber.
Wrong title, sorry about that. You still have Jan's title there. Yeah.
I would love to have the title. That's fine.
For those that are on Twitter or on the LinkedIn universe, I'm sure you've noticed the new star on the horizon of KQL, if I may say it like that. No, I mean, it's always funny, when suddenly you see someone coming up with, with sharing all his queries. So that is very cool. So I'm happy to have Bert-Jan here today. And then, of course, as always, we have some what's new information. We have what did we do this month. And here also, I really like to encourage maybe for next year, don't feel shy. If you're doing something with KQL, drop us a note if you'd like to share it, or if you want us to share your work. We had previously in the show someone who shared a query. That's always welcome, and we have room for that in our KQL show. So let's kick it off. What's new?
Yes, you can grab the screen.
Yeah, I'll do so. So let's start from the beginning. So this week there was an announcement about firmware assessment support, which is now in public preview. So for those that use Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, which is an add-on to Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, or you could also have it standalone, but I guess most people currently just use that as an add-on. If you haven't enabled that, until March next year, it's still in public preview, so you can sign up for, I believe, 90 days and have a look. And what I did after it was launched earlier this year, we now see a further enhancement, and that goes in the area of firmware, which I truly believe is also as important as vulnerable software. There are UEFI boot attacks, and knowing about vulnerabilities within drivers and firmware will be definitely a handy addition. So if you have enabled the vulnerability add-on, you will see here under the inventories. So before we go to KQL, let's first quickly look at the GUI. If you go to inventories, in addition to software, browser extensions, certificates, you will now also see a hardware and firmware tab. And in my little world, we see that I have a MacBook, a Service Book, a virtual machine, and my latest secure core laptop, ThinkPad. And if we click on that and we go into the details, we can go into the software details here, but we also can go to the installed devices. If I go to installed devices, I basically also see security recommendations, and underneath the security recommendations, we will now also see, if we filter on this, you can here filter on firmware updates. And if there was a firmware update, it would show it actually here. And of course, here on the left side, I believe there's now more information about the device, firmware, processor, BIOS, version, etc. So in KQL, that means that we have a new table called DeviceTvmHardwareFirmware. If you run that, you get basically always 3 records back currently for each device. So we get information about the hardware, the firmware or BIOS, and processor. And as you can imagine, there's more information within the additional fields. So we have make, model, etc. Under BIOS, we see the release date, and in the processor information, we see the processor family. So that was for my Surface Book, and when we look at my Lenovo, we see similar information. If we go to the processor, for example, this one has a Qualcomm processor in it, and the firmware version as well. Now, it doesn't stop there, because within the table that we already had, so the device TVM configuration assessment, there's now also another category called firmware. And in there, if we do so, we will basically see firmware information, whether it's UEFI, and we see also, whether it's actually compliant. If it is compliant, it means it has UEFI. If it's not compliant, and of course, if it's applicable, set to 1. And you would, of course, typically, say, okay, if it's applicable at all. Otherwise, you might also get devices listed where, of course, UEFI doesn't make sense at all. Yeah, that is currently the first addition also in the secure configuration assessment. And yeah, I guess we can expect more firmware-related security recommendations as well. So yeah, if you already have dashboards or queries around the security configuration assessment, you might want to consider adding the firmware and eventually also the firmware hardware information to it. We will see also this extended with driver information. So if you have vulnerable drivers, those should then be listed as well, I believe, in the future. Be aware, this is a public preview. I can tell from my side that I've asked all my colleagues, to actually update their devices. I was lucky enough to be in a private preview. Everybody, gave me feedback. We've updated our devices, and still we see here and there some discrepancies between the effective state of the device or what's in the software inventory versus the security recommendations. And if you do see similar things, please be so kind and just, give feedback or report an inaccuracy, which you can always do here within the portal. And that will help the product team to maybe fine tune some things. Yeah, but yeah, I believe it's a great addition. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Johnny.
Cool. Thank you. So what I've been doing this month with KQL, I was thinking about phishing detections and dynamic phishing pages. And what I noticed was a lot of phishing pages have a Base64 encoded string for the email address, because they want to generate dynamic pages, and you don't want to put in an email address in the URL because that's noticeable and human readable. So what a lot of phishing campaigns and phishing kits do is they use the Base64 encoded string for the email address, so they can automatically generate it. and they can send this in a URL, and you won't be able to notice that it's a phishing page or that it's your email address. So what I was playing around with was, if you have in the email events, you have the URL info and you have the network strings. What you can do is you can combine the email events and the URL info into a single line. And then you can use the base encoded string of the recipient email address to see if there's any Base64 encoded email addresses targeted for your users. So that way you can detect that if someone is sending you a string with the Base64 encoded URL, then you can detect it. In this case, I was playing with the Microsoft ak.ms site just to create a link. And then you can see that my email address was appended to it. The next thing you can do, see if the demo goods are happy with me today, is you can also correlate it to the device events, so that you can check if the URL from the URL info was actually opened on a system with Defender for Endpoint. And it's still not here. But the thing is, this will work because Defender for Endpoint will report URLs which have been opened. And I know I've opened this link, so maybe in the end of the show, I can show that this query will actually work. And then it's a really quick win to detect phishing emails. So that's what's my Learn KQL, and also a bit of what have you done with KQL this month, Base64 encoding.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's I think we can now switch to our guest of today. Unless you have something else, Alex.
No, give it a go, Bert-Jan.
All right, cool. It's cool that you mentioned the Base64 one, Jenny, because I also have an example for that one. So then
cool.
We can use that one as well if yours won't work in time. Let me quickly share my screen. From there I can start. I have a small presentation, and then we move on to the fun KQL stuff. And yeah, thank you for having me, of course, here in this lovely session. I want to deep dive a bit into the KQL digital forensic and incident response part. So there is an incident has triggered, but what can you do with KQL to find additional evidence that you need, or find additional actions that the attacker has performed? So yeah, what I already said, the starting point are some incidents, and I hope that all of you will never see this screen with the ransomware actors or with some other multi-stage incidents or multiple threat families that we have seen, but hopefully it will be less than this. But if it is, then during the session I hope to explain something about how you can find out what exactly happened, what maybe your next actions should be. So first of all, we have a compromised laptop or a compromised server or a compromised account, and that triggers an incident because some malicious activity has happened. Then we can do two separate things. We can either automate a specific action for search for additional evidence with the help of a logic app, or we can do a manual action and we use that manual action to search in the evidence as well, and then a Sentinel or Defender for Endpoint or some other data that you have in your SIEM solution. And during the session, I will only talk about the manual action because the logic app is mostly a shell around your KQL query, not really the query itself. So that's, I think, somewhat more interesting for this topic. And then the goal of the IR queries that we have is to enrich the incidents. either your SOC analyst can make this so they can have easier decision making, or to find related malicious activities such as IOCs that you can put in your Defender solution or used as input for additional investigations. And then from there on, for example, you see that lateral movement has performed, so then you need to investigate an additional device as well. But first of all, let's take a step back. Before you implement these actions, it's important to get to know your data sources. So use the tables in Defender or Sentinel and just do some summarized count by, for example, action types. Or if you have Windows event logs, do some counts by the event IDs that you see, or do distinct count or make sets from what actions are in your environment. Get a feel for the data that you have in there, and also get a feel about what data might help you in case that you have an incident. That can be really helpful to get to know your data. And the next thing is prepare for your incident response cases, because it's important to have the queries available once you need them. It's better to think of them up front than while you are in a crisis situation. That will probably take you a lot more time than when you have some piece to think about the detections. So first of all, think about what information do I want to collect when a specific incident is triggered or when multiple incidents have been triggered. And then build your queries before the incident takes place. You can either do it yourself or use one of the communities that are available on GitHub. You have lots of resources these days for, I think, a lot of nice queries that you can use. Then also validate the quality of the query. So run some scripts on your laptop or some server that simulates an attack, and then validate if you can get the evidence that you want to have. The last thing is automate if possible. So use the automation part. I think the logic apps are very, very valuable in there that you can use to enrich the incidents, for example, automatically. So the logic app triggers once a specific incident, the Sentinel is created, and you build a logic app that runs at the incident trigger, and then it pastes a comment in your incident, and that can already help you in some incident investigations. And that's my theory part for now. And I will quickly stop sharing my screen and share my other screen. And if there are questions, please let me know. All right. And I have shared again. I think my screen should be visible.
Yes, it does.
Great. And we have a test machine that triggered a lot of incidents, as you can see, and that's the good part, because then we can use the incidents to enrich our information that we would need. I selected one specific incident that I want to deep dive in a bit. Let me see if I can find that one. That was the password stealing from files. So now we have the incident. We see that some action has been performed. So a sequence of exploitation activities has been done, some password stealing, process discovery, and so on and so on. And what we can see is that Explorer did something, then some CMD file run, again a CMD file, and some other activities. Defender already has quite a nice feature, because it seems like the reset.cmd did something. However, unsure what it exactly did. So if you go to in Defender, go to the file itself, you can already, it loads a bit, because we need the options to perform the demo. It is never a demo without some stuff breaking. I think I also have it here. I already loaded it up front, so in case it didn't work, we can use it. So we have the reset button, and you have some actions, and you can already use the Go Hunt option that's available in Defender. And what it does, it will run a specific query based on the entities of this reset.cmd file. And I will load it for a bit. So we see the CMD file, the hash of the SHA-1 hash and the SHA-265 hash. We see a specific, some selected timestamp that it happened, and we'll search for the events between 1 hour before the incident and 1 hour after. I will also uncomment all the other options that we have all the data available if we want to have. Then you can see that 5 events have been triggered. So there are only device events that have been triggered. If we dive a bit to the right, we can see that multiple files have been added. So the file was named reset.cmd, but also KQLCafe.cmd, KQLCafe.txt. So that's already interesting information what we can use in case of an incident. However, this is still quite limited because we only know the file information. Instead, we know the file names, and we also know the file locations that it was stored. However, you would preferably want to know what the file did. So what processes did it create? What information did the file use? What parameters did the file have? I created a specific query to find this. So I will quickly go over the query itself. So we have again the SHA-1 hash. We could also use the file name, but in this query we use either the SHA-1 hash or the file name. Then the SHA-1 hash is of course a better search method. In this case we have a search window, so we look a maximum of 8 days back. And then we are going to define some variables. So we're going to look in the device file events, where either the SHA-1 hash is filled or so either the malicious file SHA-1 hash is filled or the malicious file name is filled. That's the if statement that we use here. And then we are going to look for all the file locations that the file was stored on. The next one is where we look for the file info. So we look, the query is roughly the same as the previous one. We look again in the search window that we defined above. We check either the malicious file SHA-1 hash or we get the file name, and then we also collect all the file names. And based on that, we also collect all the SHA-1 information, because it can be that you are looking for a specific file name. However, a file name can be the same, but the hash can be different. So that's also interesting to know if, for example, the file was first entered your environment with a specific hash, then someone changed it, and then the hash also changed. So that can be interesting to know. And then the last thing that we do is we combine all the information that we already had. And we are also going to look to the device process events, where the initiating process command line contains the file information. And I will run this query. I think I set the search window correct. Yes. And what this does, this contains all the events that have happened with either the SHA-1 hash or the file name. In this case, I filled the SHA-1 hash, so the SHA-1 hash is filled. And then we are going to find all the events that have happened with that hash. If I move down, I will first move down. That gives me a quick summary. So this gives me all the SHA-1 hashes. The line below gives me all the file locations that the file was stored on. So I had it in my desktop. I put it in some random folder and also in some other random folder. And then the last one is all the file names that the file had. But what is mostly interesting are all the processes that have been created with the file. Because in the event we saw some password discovery, also some network discovery. And if we go, and now we can all see, now we can see all the subprocesses that have been created with this specific file. And this is really valuable information, because now we can see that all the command line, if you see only one command line, it is not necessarily malicious, but if you have all these command lines in a sequence, then it's definitely something worth investigating. And this is more valuable information than you had in the alert. For example, the netgroup domain, NetUse hacker, all the other ones, they weren't in the alert, but they are in the KQL. And there the KQL can really be a valuable addition in your tool set, because you can find the actual events that have happened and not only the ones that are correlated to the incident that was triggered. That is the first incident response query that I wanted to share with you. And if you have questions about this one, please let me know, and otherwise I will move on to some other ones. All right, and we'll move on to the next one. And this is partially related to the Base64 decode that Johnny already explained a bit about. And this is looking for encoded PowerShell commands in your environment, because some threat actors use encoded PowerShell to obfuscate their actions, and Defender has built in, so KQL has built in functions to decode those strings. And then you don't have to go to some online tool to decode them, but you can just do it from the KQL statement itself. So what we have here, we have some encoded list, and these are the parameters that can be used to encode PowerShell commands. Then we have again a compromised device. We have some time frame that it happened in. Then we're going to look at the device process events. So we match the compromised device and the time frame that you already selected, and now we, in the line 7, we only look for the specific PowerShell execution. So the actual when you open PowerShell and then perform some or execute some commands, we only look for those specific ones. We can do more, but then the results will be a bit more wrangled. So for now, I will leave it at this. Then we take a look at the process command line where any of the encoded commands have been used. So then we can identify some possible encoded PowerShell executions. And then I will run this query up until this point to see what the output of that will be. Then we see that we have 4 different events. I'll quickly only select the command line that we have. So we can see 4 different events. So PowerShell executed something with an -e tag, which is an encoding tag, and also 3 other ones with the encoding tag. So that already shows that some encoding has been used on this machine. However, it is still unclear what was done. With the Base64 one, you can extract what happened. So if we go collect the command line and the Base64 string, we can now see the command line and the Base64 that is parsed to a string itself. And then we can also decode this one. I'll quickly remove this line again. Display this one. Now we can see that we have the device, some commands were executed, and the command line is decoded for us, and now it is human readable. I think this was something that Johnny also wanted to show with his email link, that it became human readable from a Base64 encoded string.
Yes.
That's great. So now I wanted to perform a wget action from my own GitHub, but it's more to show what you can do, and it's definitely interesting to see what actions have been performed by some encoded PowerShell commands, that it became human readable, and now you can identify what the exact action was that an attacker might have performed. I also have a different one, and that is related to ASR rules. So in some alerts, you see that some ASR rule has triggered, but it's definitely interesting to get to know what ASR rules triggered on what machines. So I also have a query for that one. That is the device events. We again have the same variables as we did before, so the search window and the device that we have. And now we look for the specific action that starts with ASR. Then you get all the ASR events, either the audited ones or the blocked ones. We can only project them as an easy example. And I think I need to change this. This one. This can give us some information. So we see that some action types have been performed. Some credential theft ones, some Office process audited, but some Office protection. Process injections as well, so that can be interesting information. But what can also be interesting, if you do not only project them, because this list can become quite large, and that can become a problem, because if you have, I only tested it I think for 1 or 2 hours on this specific device, but if you have devices running in a live environment, then this list can become really long and really complex to identify. And certainly if you have a long search window that you look for, what can then be helpful is if you, instead of look for the specific, so the raw events, you're going to visualize the output. You then summarize the count by, for example, you summarize the total count of ASR rules that have triggered by the action type. Just start with that. We only have the event. So we saw that in the 2 hours that I performed this action, the LSAS was triggered 4 times and the processing action 1, and the child process was triggered 2 times. You can render that in a time chart as well if you would want to. This, I think, will not give me the results that I really want to, because I have too limited information to validate this. But it shows me something, because now you can see that around 5 I performed 4 actions, and it was a long time quiet. So this was my boot action that I performed. Then you can see on 6 I performed 2 actions again, and those are the more interesting ones. But this is also something that you can use in your own environment and just test the summarized count by some time variable to get valuable information about the spikes that you have in some ASR events. And that can also give you a baseline of what is the normal activity performed on such a workstation or such a server. And that you can then use to either identify outliers or to find spikes in the activities, and then identify those specific activities in more detail to see what specific action types have been triggered. And you can do the same ones for specific action types. So build or make a baseline for some action type. So how often does an action type appear in your environment? And if it appears suddenly, so if it never happens in your environment, that can already be interesting. But if you have a baseline that is, for example, 10 a day, and now you have a outlier that is roughly 20 or 25, it can also be interesting to take a quick look at. And that you can also use in your events, in your incident response events, to visualize the output that you have. And I can quickly show you that as well on this machine. But if we then go to then we can build a query together, and then we're going to look at the device process events, because I want to have a specific baseline of the command lines that I have executed, and if I see some outliers in that one. So we have where the device process event, where my device name is the compromise account that I already specified. I will do the timestamp between 11 days ago and 8 days ago, because I performed it somewhere in the previous week or the week before. Otherwise, the results will be too widespread to have some valuable information on it. First of all, we start by the account names that have performed device process events to get some insight in what actions have been performed by which account. So we see the most of them are system account, and the other accounts that are in my environment that are regular Windows accounts. So I think the only one that is interesting in this case is the admin account. Take the admin account, and now instead of by account name, we do it by the initiating processes that have happened. We start by the file name, so we can quickly identify what processes have started what applications. So we see that SV Host did something, the Edge Update did something, Explorer did something, PowerShell did something, Net did something, and CMD did something. it can be valuable information. It depends a bit on the baseline that you have. The next one that I want to do is do it by bin and to check what actions were interesting. And this time I think this is still too big. Then I want to render this. Under a column chart. So now we have the events that have happened over the time that I used this machine. So I have the machine that I suspected was breached. We have the processes that have been generated. We have the account that has performed the actions. And we now have the total count for each minute. And you can see that normally it only performed a few processes each minute, or it didn't perform any processes that minute. And then we see two huge spikes. And those are interesting, because if we go back, so we see that it was roughly performed between 1731 and 1734. And if we go back to the first query that we executed, I hope this will work, but of course it's a demo and this doesn't match. So it didn't match, but it should match. And that is, normally you would then see that the timestamps that you see here would match up with the timestamps that you see here, but that is of course not the case because it's a demo. All right, see, I prepared, I believe, one additional example that we can use, and that was, I think, again the PowerShell one. So that's, I think, everything that I wanted to discuss about the demo part, about the incident response queries. And I think, in my opinion, they are really useful because you can enrich your incidents with the raw data that's there, and not only rely on the information that you see in the user interface, because they can sometimes lack the information that is needed to perform your investigation. And most of the information is indeed available in the timeline. However, it can be easier to collect it via KQL queries. And the queries itself can have some valuable information to collect your information that you need, and that's mostly, in my opinion, the count, the summarize actions that you can perform. So the count ones or the make set ones, because then you can easily make a set with the information that you need, and then you get a list with the file names that you, for example, need to investigate upon further. And that's my part, I think, at least the demo part.
Cool. You have some really nice queries. I think for me, it's always finding the right way to crawl through the data, because I must say sometimes I'd rather go from the timeline to Excel than browse through there, but that's because of all the delays.
Yep.
In the end, I think you have some nice links you can do with the file name and the parent and the initiating parent, and then you can do some cool things. So it's nice queries.
Good to hear. Yeah, and I think I agree with you on the Excel part. That sometimes it's even easier, but
yeah,
it depends a bit. But I think the data is mostly there. What's really valuable about the timeline as well is that you also see what kind of fields are in there and what kind of fields you need to query on if you want to have them in your KQL query as well.
Yeah. And are there any new queries or blogs or anything you're working on at the moment, or just relaxing till the end?
Well, not really. It's mostly a bit of the same that I already did. So building upon the detections that I already have, or some more. I want to add some more incident response queries to the repository. but it takes a bit of time, and really need to find the right way of displaying the data, because otherwise it can be misleading if you collect the wrong information, and then you would not want to have a query that represents false positive data in there as well, but at least as little as false positive data as possible, because otherwise it can be misleading for the ones that are investigating.
Yeah, so you want to add some context, or
yeah, something like that indeed. And also I really want to use the scan operator. I saw in one of the previous ones that it was explained as well, but I have not had the time yet to try that one out, and I think that one is really useful.
yeah, it's really powerful because you can create statements, so to say, and then you can see if it happens between a certain amount of time or a certain amount of values. So you can create really cool stuff with that also.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And definitely for the example that I gave, so the script that we had, I think you had the list of possible malicious file names, I think, or the net group, the UMI, that kind of Windows variables that you can use, and that's really useful in the scan one, because that will definitely trigger for this script as well. At least
Yeah.
I hope.
So it makes sense. Well, so any other questions? So then the good news and the bad news for my side is I got my query to work, but I had to use a different table. Because
No
what
worries.
happened? Let me share my screen again. So first I was looking at the device process events. The device events. So I said, hey, I want to see so we have the Base64 recipient mail address, then the URL info joined on the network ID. So you have all the ID, all the URLs in an email. And then you say, hey, I want to see which URL has the Base64 recipient. And that did work. But then I checked device events in the table of browser launch to open a URL. But what it is my browser was already opened, so it didn't go as planned. So when I was looking in the tables, I see nowadays you also have the URL click events. So if we do URL click events instead, and then this one was URL. Now you can see that in the URL click events was there was a hit on it. So over here you see that it was launched, and once it got opened, it also referred to Bing because there's no AKMS for my email address. And if we look at this specific table, you can see that it's every link opened through MDO is logged here. That's a nice one. And what we can also do, because I was looking for the data, let's do it again, search. And see it's also in the device process event. That's a bit strange because in the device events, we couldn't see it opening, but in the device process events, it does show in the, where is it? In the URL. So it does launch. Can I make this bigger? It's just, okay, that's MS. It's not here. So over here in the initiating process command line, you can also see that it's there. So it's you can use 3 tables for the same query. You can use the device process events, URL click events, or the device events, whichever holds your data. So that's my part 2.
Johnny,
Cool.
do you know if it's either the URL clicked once or the browser opened, or is it, or can it also be 2?
It can also be 2, because I was working with this query, I think the last month, more or less, and it was always the device events. And now all of a sudden it changed. And today I also saw that the device events still work. So I need to fine tune this a bit to see which one of the 3 works best. That's that.
Cool. Let me actually add to the conversation we had before. No, Bert-Jan mentioned, adding context to the queries. And I think here from our friend Olaf or Falcon Force, the way how they write their detection, I actually even internally adopted that idea that, just adding a little comment is nice within the query, but actually giving some more context, like, okay, what is the technical description of the attack, but also, a word about false positives. And I believe, especially for those queries that we tend to share with the community and with people, if we make a little extra effort, well, actually, it's probably not just a little, but I think it would be helpful, especially around detections, to not just drop the KQL query, but also give some more context to those. Yeah. So that's a little note of appreciation towards Olaf and the crew. Good.
They are really setting the bar for those detections. And they also categorize it perfectly in the Mitra Tech kill chain. So that's also really useful. And definitely their false positive part as well.
No, definitely the way to go. Also to circle back, a couple of months later. So for those like me collecting open publicly KQL queries for detections, if you didn't know yet, have a look here at the Falcon Force team. By the way, let me do some marketing for them. I have no stocks from them at all, but I think it's worth mentioning. If you go to Sentinel, so if you're a Sentinel user, you simply go here and you go to Content Hub, because I notice in my day-to-day work that maybe not everybody is aware of the Content Hub. And what you can do here, also if you look for inspiration of queries, in this case, I know that they have one, so you can actually deploy their solution, which will give you also a bunch of, I already did, so I would reinstall hunting queries. But of course, you can also just search for things like that, like here, hunting queries, and then have a look, for any hunting queries you might, find useful.
This is really cool. I was trying to implement the Falcon Force queries, but I did not know that it was also in the Content Hub, and you can just download the queries.
Yeah, that saves you a little bit of, copy paste and adding. Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. By the way, this is the UI. What I always tend to do, maybe another tip, if that's useful, GitHub, Sentinel. So when I can't sleep and I'm on my tablet, and of course I'm not going to launch the Portal Azure on my tablet, but if I want to know what's new, I basically go here to Solutions. And if then you go, for example, to the Falcon Friday source, That's also a way how you can basically crawl a little bit if you're bored and to understand, without actually installing what's included in those content packs. So this is basically the back end of what you see in the Content Hub to a large extent. Great. So what did I do this month? Well, first of all, I had to fix a query I had written a couple of years ago, where I had blogged about hunting for local group membership changes. And upon some feedback from some readers, and I noticed myself that unfortunately the schema has changed, which I hope, of course, is not going to happen too often. But yeah, historically, it's actually exactly this one. The member SIG that was historically, so let's start from scratch. So we have device events, that one, of course, we still have. We still have the action type user account added to local group. That's fine as well. And then there used to be within the additional field a member SID, so the SID of the member that was added. Yeah, and based on that, I had built my whole query and verified things, and then turned out the result was this large query, also looking, if it's a new created domain user and whatsoever. But yeah, bottom line is I will have to update this one because that member SID doesn't exist anymore. So the new one is basically this one. That if we look at such a record that was produced, so here we still have the SID of the user, but yeah, I have to join it because there's no name. And unfortunately, so if someone from a product group is listening, it's nice, but the other problem that I have, if it's a group, as you can see here, because I have no match, because in the identity table, we only have currently information about users and their account SIG. So I know because I ran those tests last night, and I see, okay, this was the initiator. That's fine. So who did it is now, you can basically grab that username from here. But the account SIG is actually, the object that was changed. And in this case, it was a user. So I had actually, removed or added JC and John Doe. But in this case, I actually, had added a group. And the problem is that I do get a GUID, but of course I cannot translate it because there is no group SID in the identity table. So that's number one. And another thing I did quite similar, and of course for my environment I had to change the names a little bit, but yeah, this is a query I wrote for the customer because they are in the process of cleaning up their local admins. Finally, they have within Active Directory a group where there are users, and members of those users are allowed to be a local admin. And the objective of this query is basically to see, okay, who is logging on actually as a local account, local admin, and then basically to verify whether that user is actually a member of that approved group. And if that's not the case, I did a little translation by creating an extent. Is approved local admin and no. And yeah, this helped the customer to find out where possibly historically someone has added that user manually to the local administrators group. And that's what we currently use for cleaning up that historical mess. So yeah, that's what I've been currently, or one of the things I'm I can share with the public. As always, we'll do our best to share those queries also in the show notes. I hope, Bert-Jan, you can share some of yours as well, or give us a pointer, and we can include them into the show notes.
I definitely can. We can discuss afterwards what we how we can best do that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it for me.
Cool. I guess we're all set for the week then.
Okay, then yeah, let's do some closing words. I mean, thanks to all those that have been hanging out with us since January this year. As I mentioned in the beginning, really received great feedback, and that's why Johnny and I will continue this in 2023. Again in December, no KQL show, but yeah, stay tuned. In January, I think I can mention that we will have Rod Trent back. Rod also was here with us in the very first show, and we thought we'd do a little first anniversary show and have Rod back and reflect a little bit on the last past 12 months. And as I mentioned as well in the beginning, if you have anything to contribute, if you want us to focus on a specific topic or find a guest that talks about something, or maybe you know someone who hasn't been on our radar, please let us know. Yeah. Otherwise, we wish you a nice evening.
Yeah. So any subject, anything, or also if you need any help, and then we can also see if we can help you through KQL, and if we can share it afterwards, that would be nice. And I think for next year we have some really cool guests upcoming, and we had some really cool guests this year. So I think let's ease into the holidays.
Yeah, and for all those past guests that were attending and still waiting on their mock, that's on my to-do list for December. So sorry for that as well. Let's actually see. Everybody knows about the must-learn KQL mock. Maybe for those who joined later, KQL must-learn. What did he say? Merchandising. Here we go. So just in case, you're still looking for a Christmas present for one of your colleagues and want to surprise them, and at the same time do something for a good cause, because all the money goes to a good cause. You can order those. The must-learn KQL mock, and of course there's also one.
This one.
Yeah, exactly. So we also have a KQLCafe mock. Yeah. Yeah, we're famous, Johnny. We have our own mock.
Yeah, but also, did you see the shirt?
Nope.
Yeah, this new shirt. Can you open the merch store again?
Yeah. You mean the Christmas shirt?
Yeah, not the caroling, but the song.
Oh, yeah. Let me see. Where are we?
Above the
Featured
apparel?
products. Oh, yeah. Here.
Ah, no. Oh, yeah, there it is on the lower right-hand side.
This one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's really for the Uber KQL nerds, right?
So I'll be receiving it in about a week or two.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What's on the backside? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, Johnny, we have to think about some KQLCafe merch eventually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okie dokie. Well, if there's nothing else, thanks for the nice comments, and see you back in 2023.
Thank you.